Okay.
Great stuff. So I'm not going to introduce myself because it's a load of bollocks. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Okay, sure. Thanks for having me. My name is Matt Lumb. I'm CEO at UK's leading men's cosmetics brand, Warpaint for Men. I've been there for 5 years nearly, and prior to that I was CEO of the UK's leading hair care brand or hairbrush brand, Tangle Teezer Limited.
Great. So how did that come about?
Chance,
Really?
fate, luck. I'm a big believer in all of them. I am an accountant by trade. I was working for a accident repair network up in the Northwest. I was at a Sage software seminar.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah, which is about as interesting as it sounds. And this guy came up on stage talking about his hairbrush brand that he'd launched. And I remember seeing him on Dragon's Den, where he'd been literally he was in and out in 5 minutes. They didn't give him the time of day. They told him it wasn't a business, that it would never work. It was a harebrained idea. It's probably quite a famous story by now at this point. And he was up on stage. Basically, he'd been asked by Sage to tell a room of 300 accountants how great the software package was. And then I got talking to him during the lunch break and asked him how the business was going. And he just kept telling me it was busy. And obviously I lived and breathed numbers, so I sort of dug a little deeper and asked him what revenues he was doing. You know, was the business profitable? And to be fair to him, he was so focused on running the business. I just don't think he had time to do all of that. So I offered to help him out and did that remotely for 6 months. I'd go down to London every third weekend of the month and spend the morning with him. And then during that, we struck up a friendship and I got to understand the business a little bit. I knew absolutely nothing about hairbrushes or plastic injection moulding or anything like that. And then 6 months in, he offered me a full-time role.
Interesting. So was it scary for you to go from what you were doing?
Oh, it was terrifying.
Really?
I'd been in the previous employment for 12 years. I headed up the finance team there. Great relationship with the directors there. I had a 6-month-old baby. And I was probably, I've never coasted, but I was probably just comfortable. But there was something about this guy, something about this product, something about this space that just drew me in. And I knew I could work with Sean. And so, took a huge leap of faith and didn't look back, to be fair. That was in the start of 2011.
It's interesting because I remember when I had my son 5 years ago, it's almost, I went into like caveman type of I need to protect this, that and the other. And at the time I quit drinking, stopped. I haven't drank alcohol since. And it was like, I need to focus on this. And so do you think that was a big factor for you really in making a decision to make that jump? Like if you didn't have your son, say.
I do now. Now I look back on it. It was right place, right time. Something decided. As soon as Harry was born just before Christmas in 2009, something inside of me, like you just touched on it there, sort of said, I'm not doing enough and I'm not earning enough and I'm not going to be able to provide enough. And I wanted to do more. I know it sounds silly. I didn't know what that more was. I certainly didn't go to that seminar at the Belfry in June 2010 thinking, this guy's going to be talking. I might get talking to him. It was just complete chance. But yes, something inside of me was just fired up when Harry came along, and I just wanted to. Every dad does, don't you? You just want to be the best dad and lead by example. And I've had so many conversations with him around the fact that work ethic is so important, and things don't just happen. You've got to work for them. Sometimes it pays off, sometimes it doesn't. And life is a series of compromise and sacrifice, and you'll continue to make them. And in my belief, anyway, you continue to make them all the way through your career and life.
How much luck do you think is involved in running a successful business?
More than people know. And I know and I make a pushback on this, I know the adage is you make your own luck. I don't believe that to be true, not all of the time. I've met some great people, great guys, entrepreneurs who just haven't had a break. And I think it's what you do with that look. And sometimes it will be just a TikTok video just goes viral, and all of a sudden your brand's right there on the map. Whereas in actual fact, cracking that TikTok algorithm is really difficult. And I think I wasn't supposed to go to this show, this seminar. I got asked less than 18 hours before, 12 hours before even. Went along. I saw what was even a glimmer of an opportunity just to speak to someone. As soon as I realised that I could provide him with something he didn't have, I grabbed that opportunity, and then I think it's fair to say I took it and ran with it. But yeah, I think luck plays a bigger part than people realise.
Yeah, and hard work. I think it's like too many people now almost see things like it's an overnight success, and they're not willing to put the graft in. And I think that's not necessarily just, if you look at any discipline, whether it's sport or whatever, you've got to work so hard.
Absolutely, and it's fine margins.
Yeah.
You know, people look at Tangle Teezer and say that was an overnight success. It's 7 years that took of incredible hard work and sacrifice and dedication and long days and long weekends and lots of trade shows and all that sort of stuff. Gymshark, people seem to think Gymshark was an overnight success. Absolutely not. You know, he's worked tirelessly to get that brand where it is. Yeah. Probably is the exception to the rule. I think a lot of people make the mistake now, certainly in the space I've been in, hair and beauty, where I think everyone thinks if I start my own brand, it's guaranteed to be a unicorn in 4 years' time, and sadly that isn't the case.
Because you get that a lot with brands where they may catch fire, but it's very localised, and then they'll hit the ceiling, and then because they've got nothing in place outside of, you know, because someone's wearing that, then everyone else will wear it in the city.
Well, you look at Montrec in Liverpool now.
Exactly, yeah.
You know, all the kids are wearing that same brand, and it is fine margins. You look at, we both support the same football team, and you've got players you've heard talking about, you know, who the best players you played with, and sometimes they'll reference someone that was in the youth team and just didn't quite get that, you know, make that grade, or maybe he was phenomenal but he broke his leg at 21, or it's just, yeah, life. But you're right, hard work is ultimately at the heart of all of it, I think.
So tell us Tangle Teezer story.
Yes. So I joined there full time at the start of 2011. I think the idea was that I would manage the finance function and get involved in the operational day-to-day side of things. I hadn't been there very long at all when it became clear that the owner-founder's time was best spent on new product development and developing new hairbrushes, different styles, all this kind of stuff. And so I moved him away from picking and packing the orders and taking deliveries of brushes from the factory, and in fact stopped him placing the orders and trying to forecast sales and stock levels and stuff with the factory. So just took off all of that day-to-day stuff, freed him up to do the creative side, which he's very good at. And then I started to very slowly build a team around me. I was lucky in that I was hiring for a finance role, and one of the girls that had worked for me up here effectively applied. There was no need to apply, just move. And she moved down to London. Then a friend of a friend introduced me to someone who was working in sales, and I was looking for another sales team member. So she joined, and then we also hired a guy to help us with the picking and the packing of the products for each of the orders. So in the first 9 months, we probably grew to about 5 or 6 of us, and then we kept it pretty tight, kept it pretty lean. The model was not a direct consumer business, which is what my current company is focused on. It was very much a bricks and mortar premium retail positioning play. So twofold in 2011, it was getting the product into as many hair salons as possible, because that gave the brand and the product credibility. Yeah. And then the consumer thinking, well, if my Vidal Sassoon trained hairdresser's using a Tangle Teezer brush, then I really ought to. And then the salon would be, well, that's fine because they're 10 quid at till point. And then Boots was our main UK retailer, and they trialled us in a couple of hundred stores to start with, I think. We then, as we were building out the team, we were developing and Sean was developing and designing new brushes. So we designed one for the gym bag or your handbag. We had a little kids one at the time. And all the time, whilst we're doing this, we're sort of exploring overseas options. The plan, and the proof's in the pudding, I think. So the global patent applications were in place as early as, I'd say, as 2007. So the plan was always to go global. Mm-hmm. I think we went global a lot quicker than we thought we might. So between the years 2011 and 2016, we grew UK revenues from 1 million to 5 million. But in the same time, we grew overseas revenues from 0 to 24 million. Wow. So by 2016, our run rate was 29.6 million, I think. But I think it always sounds more impressive when you're talking units as opposed to just pound notes. So all of the product was manufactured in the UK. And I wanted that because it meant I could be very hands-on with the factory and also very nimble in terms of changing orders, changing production schedules, adding to them. And being an hour away from the factory in Oxfordshire, and so as we sort of built the team out and focused on that international expansion, the unit sales went from I think around 40,000 a month to in 2016 we were producing more than 1 million brushes a month out of the two UK facilities, and along that time. We were ticking lots of boxes. We were on fast track for 4 consecutive years. I think there's only 2 brands that have been on more than 4 years, and that was Innocent Drinks and Brewdog. Right. We were featured on Profit Track, Export Track. We had industry-leading margins, and it's fair to say that when Sean launched the original Tangle Teezer, he created a whole new category in hair care. Nobody had a detangling hairbrush in their range, whereas now every hairbrush brand in the world has the detangling offering front and centre.
So how was Sean then when this monster was being created and it was literally going?
Yeah, he was good. He was. I mean, the reason that Sean and I work so well, I think, is he let me do my thing. Yeah. He focused on the design side of things. He focused on the creative side of things. And I focused on making sure we could make enough brushes, that I was hiring the right people, that the culture was key, and the culture was king, and the culture was incredible. People joined and nobody left for the first 4 years. And yeah, I think, I mean, I'm still in touch with Sean. He lives overseas now. But I like to think he enjoyed the ride. He didn't have to do anything, too difficult or too heavy. All the boring back end stuff was dealt with by me.
So do you find then yourself is creating that team is paramount, really?
It is, yeah. I think most businesses now, if they want to have a successful offering or a successful business, if you like, there's a combination. You need a brand, you need a product that works, and you need the right team. And in my experience, without all 3, if you've only ever got 2 of those 3, then it's going to be a lot more difficult. Whenever I'm asked to talk about the Tangle Teezer story, I make it clear from the outset, it's never about me. It was always about we. Yeah. It was never just Sean. It was never just me. It was never just the brush. We had the perfect combination of everybody, and yeah, they were a key piece of, and they made it fun. We had fun. We worked hard, but we had fun along the way. Made loads of mistakes. Talk to them about them for hours. We learn from them.
I think people now, they're too scared to make mistakes. I think it's just trying to get this perfect product or whatever it is before they take it to market. And you're thinking, by the time you've done it, you've missed a boat.
You have. Oh, you have. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You obsess over the minute detail sometimes. And in my experience, it's always over like a font on the packaging, or just get the thing to market, prove the concept. You can tweak on V2 or on, when everyone's always refreshing their branding and, that sort of minute detail. But
I think a lot of that's down to fear.
Because fear of failing, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. That's the real reason, isn't it?
Of course it is. And I'm fear of failing every day. But I think that also keeps you on your toes. And I think if you're not failing or if you're not making mistakes, you're probably not taking enough risk or taking enough chances. Yeah. And if it was that easy, we'd all be doing it.
Would you say that's your biggest driver, fear?
That's a good question. It's I think one of them. Yeah. I've always suffered with, and still to this day sometimes. I'm quite open talking about suffering from imposter syndrome sometimes, where you know, in the back of my brain I'm thinking I'm just an over promoted accounts clerk, when in actual fact it prevents complacency ever from setting in. When I left Tangle Teezer, I was absolutely convinced I'd be unemployed for the rest of my life, which is, you know, I've got my friends and family around me saying, what on earth are you talking about? And as it pans out, that isn't what happened. And I'm probably slightly more, I'm a bit older now. You know, I met Sean I was 37 or something, and now I'm grand old age of 51, and you're probably a little bit more self-assured. But yes, failure, and not failure in terms of, oh crikey, I might lose my house, or obviously you do fear that. It's more, I don't want my lad to see me fail, if you like.
Someone asked me recently, and it's, you know, you get is it money, is it this, is it that? And I think, if I'm being honest, my biggest driver would be fear.
Yeah.
And I think that's what gets me up at daft o'clock every morning and gets me out the door to work, is because it's just that relentless wheel of
wanting to succeed.
Yeah.
And I think that people have asked me the same. What drives you? Is it money? And it's not like money. If you end up in a successful business that's profitable and can afford to pay people a handsome salary, then the money's a consequence of the success. I think if money's your main motivator, for me, I think that gets in the way of lots of other things that can be deemed success in terms of what success looks like.
Yeah, definitely. So how did you manage the growth?
So one of the biggest challenges we had, we'd proven the concept.
Yeah.
It was popular with hair salons. It was popular with people at home. People in Boots were buying it every day, every week. So we've created this category. We need to be the market leader in the category we've created in as many territories as humanly possible. And in order to do that, I need to be able to make enough hairbrushes. But to make those hairbrushes, you need tooling. And to buy the tooling, you need cash. We never fundraised at Tangle Teezer. We were always self-funded and funded through profits. So I guess it was a case of, instead of tearing into 10 new territories every month, it was a case of picking and choosing, identifying maybe a new territory every couple of months, whilst I'm working in the background and making sure that we've got the capacity. One of my biggest fears, again, we go back to fear, was racing into, say, a huge retailer in Germany and, sending over the pipe fill order and then having to tell them when they place a reorder that actually, sorry, it's going to be 6 months. So that was one of the challenges. Obviously, building the right team out and making sure we had the right people on board was really important. And I mentioned this before, but managing a £4 million business is very different to managing a £2 million business. Then 4 million went to 8 million, then 8 million went to 15 million, and running a £15 million business is very different to running a 2 million. And all of a sudden, you don't actually do the stuff that you trained to do when you were a bit younger. I didn't do numbers anymore. My job was to manage the individual teams, although they managed me most of the time, to be honest. And
what would you say if you could try and nail one thing from 2 to 10, what would you say was the biggest difference?
Culture. Yeah. I didn't expect 70-hour weeks, but when we had to, everybody would put the long days in, and we'd all work the weekends for 2 of the biggest trade shows of the year. And we were all completely aligned on what we wanted this brand to be. And we all treated that brand as if it was our own. So for me, it was that. Obviously, there's a ton of stuff behind that, but the fact we had the right team and everybody gelled, and if we did hire 1, maybe 2 people who clearly weren't right, and they exited pretty quick because the rest of the team was so well aligned that I didn't want to lose that.
So talk to me a little bit more about the culture.
We had a bit of we were all a lot younger then. We were 20s and 30s, and it was a case of not work hard, play hard. It was a case of work hard, and then every week we'll grab dinner. a lot of us had relocated from the north and the Midlands to London, so didn't have a huge amount of family and friends down there. So we kind of ended up being this dysfunctional family, if you like. It does get to a point where that's really, really difficult to maintain. I think once you're up and above 20 odd people, you'll just get little cliques forming amongst the staff, and all of a sudden, instead of everybody wanting the CEO to take them out for dinner, it's a case of, actually, we don't really want you there because it's you we want to moan about. So, that's natural, and I think not taking that too personally was key. But I was always really big on career development and empowering people and making sure that if they were at point A, at the start of year one, that they would be well advanced a year on from there, 2 years from there, 3 years from there. And then that also gave them no reason to leave and to go and work somewhere else.
Tell me a little bit about, obviously, planning up to exit and the plans when you got past that.
Yeah, I get asked this a lot, and the honest answer is we never ran the business for exit. Right. And I know some businesses do, and I think there's a fine balance in terms of, because I think when you're running a business for exit, you make decisions you wouldn't normally make. And our philosophy, or my philosophy, was, it's okay to make mistakes. I'm not going to get mad. As long as they're not costing us an absolute fortune and we're not making the same mistake over and over again, don't be afraid to try something a little bit different. It might work. We might have a massive success with this particular collaboration that I never thought would work. And then we had other collabs where I thought this one's a surefire winner, and it never took off. So I think that was really important in terms of, the whole ethos there.
So from that journey, then, what was the plan when you got?
So in terms of exit, we Sean and I would speak about it informally over coffee and stuff, and we always knew we had different private equity firms wanting to speak to wanting to just keep in touch from very early on, and I guess it's the $1 million question: is when do you decide to start the process? And the general consensus seems to be then, and even now, that a lot of companies, the aim is, let's get to 10 million EBITDA, and then we're talking serious multiples with serious people. And up to then, it's probably just additional funding, no real liquidity events, as you prep for, either a large minority or even a majority exit. So there's lots of things now that I know, boxes that you'd need to check. Like I said before, intellectual property is really important. We had patents, we had design regs, we had trademarks all around the world, and we had them protected before we went to launch. It's then about enforcing them. So we had a zero tolerance approach to that. We had the right distribution setup, I think, that enabled rapid scale. And so it was sort of like the distribution model obviously was external, but it was never a manufacturer stroke customer relationship. They were an extension of Tangle Teezer. So Tangle Teezer Germany is a great example. They were basically Tangle Teezer, but based in Munich, even though it was their own business, and they bought the products off us and sold them on, and made their margin along the way. I think in a nutshell, we got to the point of exit by, I think the majority of the business was built on relationships.
Right.
Both internally and externally. And that worked. It worked well for me, and it's something I would definitely do again.
Is there anything you'd change if you had your time over again?
Yeah, probably. Do you want me to go into detail?
Go on.
I probably would have tried to convince Sean that maybe we should have looked at the exit attempt a little sooner. We did it in 2016, and 2016 was a pretty tumultuous year with the EU referendum and a few other bits and pieces. So yeah, probably 18 months sooner, and done it a lot quicker, and not been out of the business for as long as we were. And it was a real eye opener and a real wake up call in terms of how much work involved to take a brand of that size, 30 million revenues, 10 million EBITDA, to market was colossal. I think people may think, well, I'll just talk to a couple of investors and they'll write me a check. That's not the process.
Is that because they'll always try and chip you down?
I think, I can only speak for some of the processes I've been involved with, but I think that's part of the process, that there's an opening offer on the table, and then as you work your way through the diligence process, then there's always room for negotiation. Someone said to me once, if you feel a little bit uncomfortable and we feel a little bit uncomfortable, we're probably in the right place. Which has stuck with me.
Okay, so you finished your time in...
I left Tangle Teezer in 2018, start of 2018, and then worked with a couple of brands just on a consultancy basis. I took some holidays, caught up with friends and family and some sleep. And then I was introduced to Danny.
Cool. And Danny is the CEO.
Danny Gray is the founder of War Paint for Men, and now also the founder of a mental health platform called Jack, which I can take zero credit for, but is doing great things. Danny suffers with a mental health condition called body dysmorphic disorder, where he obsesses over how he looks. And I mean, to the nth degree, his hair, his outfit. So we've been late for board meetings because he's had to get changed 2 or 3 times and get showered 2 or 3 times, and has had to go back home because he doesn't feel he looks right. And it's real. I've seen it firsthand and close up. Really good guy. He was bullied at school because he is the kids at school said kids can be cruel. His ears stuck out, so he had his ears pinned back at a really young age. And then he broke out, as all teenagers do. His skin flared up, I think when he was 13 or 14. So he borrowed his sister's makeup and just used some concealer to cover the spots. And in his words, he was a new man. He felt confident because you couldn't see the spots, and it just gave him a bit of confidence. Yeah. And he wore makeup every day from that day on. And then he got to his late 20s, and he was complaining to his best friend. I think they were playing golf, and he was complaining to his best friend that there's not a single brand out there that caters to men that might want to wear makeup. And his mate said to him, instead of moaning about it every single time we played golf, why don't you just do something about it? And he did. And he spent a year developing the product, and came up with the quite brilliant name War Paint, which has been slang for makeup for decades, and got the trademark on that. He launched in November 18. Sales went better expected in month 1, 2, 3. He launched. He published an advert on I think it was Instagram that went viral for all the wrong reasons. I believe it had 8 million views in 48 hours, and they were all negative. It was all about toxic masculinity. He'd used some real big jacked up guys with tattoos up to the necks and full sleeves and stuff, and it didn't go down well at all, but it did get people talking about the brand. He then went a few weeks later and pitched on the BBC's Dragon's Den. So similar, obviously Sean had also been on Dragon's Den. And he did really well on there. He had all 5 dragons make him an offer, and then, undercutting each other. He shook hands with 2 of them. And then he came out the den and said to a friend of his who also owned the 3PL hub, I'm struggling a bit. Everybody wants a piece of the pie. I've got this whole viral thing that scared the life out of me. I could do with some help. And this chap and I had met at a fast track event a couple of years earlier, and and asked me if I'd reach out to Danny. And the idea was to reach out to Danny. I thought I could help. I like the space. It's really disruptive, which gets me fired up. It's a new category, which gets me fired up. I could see a play for this in retail. It was purely D2C at the time. And so I thought, maybe a day a month, 2 days a month, just sort of like help mentor this guy who's obviously got a great brand, and he's very passionate and very infectious. And he somehow convinced me to join him full time. To this day, I've got no idea how that happened, but I did. And again, it's been a very difficult, very different challenge. We face lots of different challenges, least of all COVID, and that closed the whole retail play down, as it did for lots of other consumer brands, not just us. But yeah, that's how I met Danny, and we've made huge progress. I think we're undoubtedly, I know in the beauty sector, most people have heard of wall paint. I think we're starting to move now into more mainstream men's grooming products, skincare and hair care, beard oil potentially, as opposed to purely makeup, which is an easier sell into retail. But yeah, it's been quite a journey. Very different model to Tangle Teezer. It's direct to consumer. We've raised funds several times via high net worth and PE and crowdfunding, and yeah, learned a lot along the way.
What advice would you give to a business owner then who's looking to scale?
Internationally or just in general? In general.
Yeah.
I'd get the best team you can afford around you. We can't all afford rock and roll stars, at launch. But I'd probably get the best people around you. Get people around you that can do what they do better than you can do that job, if that makes sense. Everybody's got their strong suit. Most creatives that have had the courage to launch their own brand or product, they enjoy the creatives. They like the new product development. They like working out what the packaging is going to look like. They like what the product range is going to look like. They don't really enjoy the boring stuff like the business planning and the cash flow forecasting and even the hiring of the team. So I think if you can get someone, again, most of the successful entrepreneurs that I've met have been really creative, and then they've had people around them that can execute and operate that idea. Yeah. So that would probably be my first bit of advice.
I find, and maybe you do as well, that there's too many business owners, entrepreneurs who surround themselves with people who are not willing to challenge them.
Yeah. Yeah,
Which
I've
is...
seen that, and I like to think I'm the polar opposite. I like to think, certainly at Tangle Teezer, I surrounded myself. We had our core age demographic was 18 to 34-year-old females. The majority of my senior management team for the first 2 to 3 years were mid to late 20-year-old females. And I would encourage them to challenge me, and they did on a daily basis. And more often than not, they were right. And I don't think there was ever a time where I pulled rank, if you like. It was a very flat management structure. We were all in it together. Of course, there were reporting lines. But I've seen the polar opposite, where people surround themselves with people just tell them how brilliant they are and just say, yes, that's another great idea, when you know full well it's not a good idea. Yeah. And the problem when you've got people like that is that you're wasting time focusing on ideas that aren't good ideas. So any decent CEO who's been brought in because the owner-founder has taken a step back, normally into the creative role, is to manage those ideas. So if they've got 100 ideas a week, let's focus on the one really good one and park the others to next week. And then next week, there's probably another 50 new ideas. And it might be that, we can focus on one of them. I think if you try and focus, and that's the beauty of, and that's the strength, and that's the nature of the owner-founders, they've got the ideas. But I think if you try and follow through on all of them because you're too afraid to say, listen, we can't do all of them for fear of whatever, you just waste your time on all the ideas that deep down are not going to work, and everybody's busy fools.
It reminds me sometimes of like a boxing entourage, like you got a boxer who's doing quite well, and then next minute they're surrounded by people who are carrying buckets and this, that, and the other, and a couple of losses, and then everyone's gone. Yeah,
and I think you almost get that as well with some businesses who have got so much money and making so much money. So, well, we need to spend it, so we'll just create another 10 positions or 10 roles that they don't need to do, or I don't know, they do a huge rebranding exercise and spend an absolute fortune. And then actually, if you ever get to the point where you need to tighten your belt and you end up, maybe getting rid of those additional new roles, the business is exactly where it was in the first place. It's a tough one. For me, Sean was really relaxed around, annual budgets and forecasts, and it was all very much, I've got a rough idea of where we're going to be in this year and next. So it was quite relaxed. I know it's not as easy as that for everybody. The business kind of told us when we needed to recruit. Yeah. If we could see that you've got one person in one department, and if they take a week's holiday, we're in trouble. Then make sure you've got some cover in that department. Because we didn't really outsource much other than the production of the brushes, which was a big one. But I had a great relationship with that manufacturer. Most of our departments were all internal, and I think in the first couple of years, pretty much all of us covered every role at some point, just covering for each other. But obviously, you can't scale like that.
Yeah. It's interesting actually, because we've got a lot of clients who are owner founders, entrepreneurs, and it's just idea after idea after idea after idea. What advice would you give to, it's all right us saying to the team, don't just do everything that you say, but if that's the way they are and they're almost a little bit scared or hesitant, what advice would you give to them in a way to say,
That's a good question as well. I think that's where sometimes, if you can afford it, and even if it's a day a week or a day a month or something, if you can get a chair on board or someone who can, and I've rarely needed this myself, but I have seen it where you can have someone help mediate potentially between. It depends who the senior leadership team is, I guess. Ultimately, I think if you're the owner founder and your way is the only way, and it's that your way or the highway, you won't retain the staff anyway, because the good ones are going to leave. The good ones are going to be like, well, I'm not progressing here, and nobody listens. And I think that was another thing I was really conscious of, is that if you close, we were always asking the team at Tangle Teezer in particular to, what do you think would be good next? What sort of collaboration do you think we should do? What sort of colours are going to be on trend next season? If you could pick any designer to collab with, who would it be? If you do that, and then they bring 6-10 ideas to the table, and every single month you close them down, and we do what Matt wants or we do what Sean wants, guaranteed they'll stop bringing ideas to the table, because the mindset will be, well, you don't listen anyway. And at that point you start to lose them. And I think the Gen Z call it quiet quitting now, whereas my generation, we just call it, no one listens to me, so I've just disengaged. And I like to think we didn't have that at all. And that, some of the ideas worked, some of them didn't. Half of mine didn't, if I'm honest, certainly with the design type of stuff. But I think my advice would be, if you're the person that no one's listening to, then maybe have a think about whether that's ever going to change. But I think that's where a strong CEO comes in. Yeah. Because a strong CEO will manage the relationship between the founder and the rest of the team. You're like a sponge where they only really, you're filtering stuff up to the founder, and you're definitely filtering stuff down to the team. And I think without that filter, occasionally then just, chaos ensues.
So you mentioned before Gen Z, obviously we're not quite that anymore, mate. So how did you find working with the different age?
I think I've learned a lot more about that in the 5 years at Warpaint than I did at Tangle Teezer. Like I said, at Tangle Teezer, a lot of the team were late 20s, 30 odd. I was late 30s, so there wasn't a huge age gap. Whereas now I'm Gen X, although my little lad calls me a boomer, which is not even funny, but I'm Gen X, and most of my team are millennials and Gen Z. He's Gen Z. The word is that the Generation Alpha is going to take over the world and do things completely differently. But a lot of my team is millennials and Gen Z, and they are incredibly creative in my experience, but they have different values and different beliefs. I was brought up from a career perspective of, certainly in finance, with the mindset being, and this still happens today in sort of, corporate banking and all that sort of stuff, that if you're not doing 60 hours a week, you're not getting noticed. And if you're last in and first out, if you're in, even though your contracted hours are 9 to 5, if you're in at 9 and out at 5, then you're frowned upon as being, you're called a part-timer. Now, that was me in the 90s and the noughties. I think that mindset has changed completely now. I think the work-life balance element is important as ever now. I've seen burnout firsthand. I've seen what it can do to people. and how ineffective they become. I think there's definitely a mindset change with Gen Z now, where it's a case of it doesn't really matter, does it, when I get the job done, as long as I get it done properly and on time. So I think you can either adapt to that and embrace it and say, actually, you're right, or you don't. Which then, if you're trying to force that generation to sit at a desk from 9 till 5 with an hour and a half commute either side of it, you're probably not going to retain them very long, because there are companies out there now that are recruiting fully remote positions, and the majority of the ones I'm seeing are at least offering a hybrid. Yeah. And I think that whole working from home versus the office is a whole different conversation around pros and cons, because I can definitely sit here now and argue for both. You know, I really, really miss the office environment, but then there's other days where, you know, I need to bury myself away and look at a 3-year forecasting financial model, and I quite enjoy doing that without any distractions.
Yeah. So just a couple of questions before we finish up about yourself, really. What's next?
That's a good question. I mean, we've successfully sort of we've managed to find during the fundraising, our last fundraising process at Warpaint, we've managed to bring on board a strategic investor who at some point will be the new majority shareholder. I will have been there 5 years, and I think we've done a good job, but it's probably time for me to do something else. Hopefully by the time this airs, that will be done. And I've got a couple of things at the back of my mind in terms of a potential product or brand in 2025. In the meantime, I'll be talking to people about sort of non-exec roles, advisory type roles, in terms of helping people scale their business and prepare for fundraising. So know all the questions that are going to be asked and what preparation looks like, and hopefully add some value. I only really get involved with any brand if I know I can genuinely add value. If it's something that's not in my remit or in the right space, then I tend to sort of not waste their time or mine.
Yeah. What piece of advice would you give to a 16-year-old you?
16-year-old me? Well, forget about joining the Air Force because you're not clever enough. Because I always wanted to be a fighter pilot.
Is that what you wanted to do?
I did, yeah. I was in the Air Training Corps and all sorts.
You still after watching Top Gun, or?
It was, someone said that to me. It wasn't. It was. I joined the Air Corps when I was 12, I think, and I think Top Gun came out when I was 13 or 14, I think. But it certainly didn't. It fanned the flames, obviously. But I
heard a story about Top Gun recently, that when they were trying to make the film, they were trying to get all the models right, and Stanley just couldn't quite get it right. And someone said, "Have you asked to borrow some of the planes and the boats from the Navy?" And people started laughing. And they were like, "Have you asked?" And he said, "Of course we haven't asked." He said, "Well, ask." So they phoned the Navy. The Navy said, "We're really struggling to recruit. Of course we'll lend you them."
Oh, that's brilliant.
So that's like, people worry about asking. It doesn't get worse than no, does it?
No.
So they've actually phoned the Navy and they've gone, yeah, great, take it.
Nice.
And that's what happened with Top Gun.
Wow. Honestly, I saw the reboot Maverick a couple of years ago. I can't remember last time I felt that much nostalgia in a cinema. It's just phenomenal. But 16-year-old me... I think just keep your head down and work hard. Like my parents had an incredible work ethic. My dad worked crazy hours, and made sure that we did okay out of that. But then I kind of had to find my own way, via a chartered accountancy practice, and then putting the hours in, and then taking risks in terms of jumping into jobs. 3 jobs on the spin, 4 jobs actually if you count Tangle Teezer, and 5 if you count Warpaint, where I wasn't sure I could do that job, but I took it anyway. And I know that whole sort of, fake it till you make it or whatever else. I don't think it's a case of that, but I do think don't be afraid to learn on the job, and work hard, and you will get noticed. You don't have to do 100 hours a week, but work hard, do things the right way, treat people the right way, and you will get, you will get noticed. But then, just to circle back to an earlier question, you categorically need some luck along the way.
Yeah.
Not just hard work. Keep seeing things on LinkedIn around, love what you do, and everything will work out. And it's not always that easy. It's not always as straightforward as that. Most people I know have done a job at some point they didn't particularly enjoy or they found boring, until they find the right opportunity. And then I guess if you are lucky enough to find those opportunities, then absolutely make the most of them. Regret the things you've done, I think, not the things you haven't.
Brilliant. Well, let's end on that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
Cheers.
Thank you.